Welcome to the Korea Pro Podcast, your weekly guide to understanding the most pressing and complicated developments shaping South Korea. We're your hosts, Jeongmin Kim,
John Lei,
and Junha Park of Korea Pro.
Go beyond headlines as we explain not just what happened, but also what really matters and why it matters.
If you monitor South Korea for work or just trying to keep up, you're in the right place.
This is the Korea Pro Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Korea Pro Podcast. It is now Thursday, June 12th. It is a little after 3:30 p.m., and it's been a little bit over a week since Lee Jae-myung has been president.
And let's start with the leader-level phone calls first. Last time we discussed how there was a call with Trump. Interestingly, Lee did not tweet or made any social media remarks about that, but he did with other leaders afterward. He had a call with Ishiba, Japanese Prime Minister, and then Xi Jinping, Chinese leader, and then Czech and Vietnam as well. Can you walk us through what he discussed with Xi, first of all?
Well, with Xi Jinping, there were a lot of things that they talked about. Firstly, if you look at the different transcripts from the South Korean and the Chinese transcripts, they obviously have different emphases.
Mm-hmm.
For example, what the South Korean side said that it sought Chinese cooperation in the denuclearization of the quote-unquote the Korean peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the Chinese readout will really focus on how South Korea and China are geographically close to each other
The
and are
usual
definitely
stuff.
destined.
Mm-hmm.
And they also mentioned about core interests, about not trying to interfere in it. And so there were some of these different kinds of emphases in their readouts. But essentially, according to the tone from both sides, it was cordial and diplomatic.
Also, it was very quick compared to the previous administration.
That is correct. When Yoon Suk-yeol became president, it took a little, there was some lag between Xi and Yoon having that phone call. But for Lee Jae-myung, it took place immediately after Ishiba.
Well, also, right after Lee inaugurated, Xi Jinping was very quick to send the congratulatory letter as well.
Which was faster than Donald Trump's.
Right, exactly. And about Donald Trump call, both sides took some time until releasing the exact details, like their side of the details about the calls. Not much like important stuff, but the tone and manner, it seemed like they were nunchieing a little bit. They were tiptoeing a little bit, like who's going to release like details first. And then interestingly, Czech Republic. This probably is to show that Lee administration is going to continue the policy in nuclear power plant exports.
Which goes back to what I was saying before about the Lee Jae-myung and the Yoon Suk-yeol administration's economic and foreign policies. If you really dive into those particular policies alone, there's not a whole lot of differences between Lee and Yoon. And so Lee Jae-myung administration is essentially carrying on what Yoon had built. And that's for the betterment of this country because it is right now mostly an export and import-based relationship between these two countries.
Right, exactly. And the fifth call was with the Vietnamese leader. And this was after U.S. and then Japan and China and then Czech Republic and then Vietnam. So this is probably to signal that something about diversification of the supply chain or whatnot.
It's also because Vietnam is a very important South Korean trade partner. Vietnam is South Korea's third largest investment country. And this predates Lee Jae-myung, this predates Yoon Suk-yeol. This goes back a long time. And Vietnam is a very important South Korean trade partner. And I was a little surprised that they had a phone call with the Czech Republic before they had a phone call with Vietnam, actually. That's how important Vietnam really is. And they were talking about how they're going to foster and expand their economic relations with each other. And both countries have a lot to gain by deepening trade relations.
And now let's move on to some of the nominations. We have been waiting for the ministerial nominations. We are hearing names for weeks now, but it does seem like it's stalling a little bit for multiple different reasons. But the administration did appoint the first vice ministers and second vice ministers for important positions, especially considering how next week is the G7 summit and where Lee will be going. We have seen the first vice and the second vice for MOFA, the foreign ministry. We have seen the first vice for the industries ministry as well, and also trade minister, which is 통상교섭본부장, which is like a vice. It's a ministerial level, but it's kind of different. It's what An Deok-keun used to do before becoming the industries minister.
It was An Deok-keun before he became industries minister, and after An Deok-keun was promoted, it became Jeong In-kyo, and now it is going to Yeo Han-gu. and is the same guy who held that position during the Moon Jae-in administration.
So that's interesting. Like he's taking the exactly same position. What kind of experience did he have during the previous administration?
So much. While Moon was president and when he was a trade minister, Yeon-gu, he was in charge of a lot of trade negotiations. He was talking with the with the British. He was talking with the Vietnamese. He was talking with the Indonesians, and he had a lot of these trade negotiations where the negotiations were either concluded or initiated. And one thing that we have to keep in mind was that when Moon was president, throughout the entire time, he never talked about the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Which is?
At the time, an 11-nation member trade bloc, which was supposed to include the United States until Donald Trump became president the first time around and withdrew the United States. But yeah, this is an extremely important trade bloc. And President Moon Jae-in at the time didn't really talk about it until almost the very end of his presidency. And toward the end of his presidency, he finally said, okay, we will talk about joining the TPP. But it wasn't the TPP anymore. Now it was a CPTPP. And Yeon-gu was at the time, he was talking to a lot of the existing member countries to get South Korea to become considered as a member. Because in order to become a member of the CPTPP, you need all the countries, all 12 current members to unanimously agree. And so he was talking
A very exclusive club.
Very exclusive. He was talking to the Malaysians, he was talking to the Bruneians, he was talking to the British. I'm not sure if he talked to the Japanese officials at the time because back then South Korea and Japan did not have very close relations. But he initiated a lot of these negotiations. Now, of course, when Yoon became president, he dropped the ball on that. And instead of really focusing on the CPTPP, he turned his attention to IPEF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum. But now...
What happened to that anyways?
Now it's mothballed. It's not defunct. Donald Trump has not withdrawn from it or disbanded it. But no one's had any sort of meetings at the IPEF since Trump became president. So it's mothballed. But now that Yeon-gu is back as the trade minister, he's in this position where he can whisper into Lee Jae-myung's ear and say, hey, this is something that we should consider, because that was exactly the argument that he made while he was out of government. While he was out of government, he was a senior fellow at the Peterson Institute, where he wrote a policy memo just last month arguing that South Korea should join the CPTPP.
So he will probably continue arguing about that, right?
Now, we don't know if Lee Jae-myung will actually agree to it. He has not said anything about this while campaigning or since becoming president, but at least for the time being, we know that the trade minister will be able to advise the president that this is the next move that South Korea should make.
Well, then from Lee's point of view, what will be the benefit and what will be the risk?
Well, the benefit is quite great. Like I said, it's a 12-country trade bloc. It represents about 15% of the world's entire trade. It will allow South Korea to really engage in a lot of trade with these Indo-Pacific countries and help to really formulate a lot of trade norms, especially when it comes to data trade. And so this is going to be a huge benefit for South Korea. But at the same time, Lee Jae-myung is right now, he's riding a high. According to the Real Media poll that was released on Monday, he's enjoying a 60% approval rating at this point. But there are a lot of domestic constituents that really hate more free trade deals, especially when we're talking about agriculture, when we're talking about manufacturing, when they realize that they have to compete with other countries' workers. And so this might take a hit, especially from labor unions and the agriculture sector. So we don't know what direction Lee Jae-myung will go. Will he do what Moon did and not touch the subject until the end of his presidency? Or will he say that I've got the political capital now, let's do this now? So we're going to have to wait and see.
And speaking of wait and see, we will have to wait and see what exactly Lee will be discussing next week at the G7, which is hosted by Canada. It seems like there have been some local media reports saying that the foreign minister under Yoon administration, Cho Tae, initially the report stated until like early this week that Cho Tae might be going, but then now a lot of reports are saying that Ri might be going instead. Ri Sang-rak, the national security advisor, very pro-alliance sort of figure, and probably alongside the people who are newly appointed as the first and second vice ministers at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And speaking of the nomination, something interesting, Lee is trying out this 국민 추천제, people's choice recommendation of the cabinet ministers. Firstly, it could be a sort of window dressing a little bit, like how cabinet minister appointments are being stalled a little bit, but he's making it look like he's giving people the choice, coming after like acting presidency, going to people who were not elected figures.
I was getting a lot of mixed signals.
Yeah.
As soon as he became president, the first name that came out of his lips was Kim Min-seok to serve as his prime minister. And when I heard that name, I thought, okay, so Lee Jae-myung is basically rewarding his closest allies and loyalists. And then he named Wi Sung-lam. And I thought, okay, so it's not just loyalists. He's actually tapping into the Democratic Party, and he's actually looking into experts. And then Yeon-guk's name was brought up, and I thought, okay, this is great. He's tapping loyalists and experts. And then they said, oh, and please name whoever you want, dear members of the public. And now I'm thinking, Bodhi McBoface? Why?
It seems like it's just like a convenient way of taking their time and selecting people if there are some internal power struggle going on between different factions, maybe. This is conjecture. But also it sort of gives like this optic that Lee tends to really like giving people like their own choice to directly make a decision when it comes to governance. Like his whole like image as a politician during the campaign, and like right now I can see that he is reading Twitter just nonstop throughout the day. Like he responds very, very quickly. For instance, like right after this post about creating Apple Watch wallpapers that look like Lee Jae-myung watch went viral, a couple of hours later he released on his own Twitter that he's actually going to instruct officials to create those watches. Like he's watching it very closely, so he likes this image of a leader that listens to the people, but the supporters will see this as people's man, but also the opponents will say this is pretty populist.
Yes, because history has shown that nothing bad has ever happened when a president really pays attention to Twitter.
And and also, what if people just come up with like crazy ideas like, oh, let's nominate Lee Jae-myung as a gender minister, like, and somehow he gathers 200,000 people to vote for him.
Or Yoon as justice minister. He doesn't have a job right now, and he's got a lot of legal experience.
Right. So a lot of things can go wrong here. So it was a very interesting choice that he made, that he's doing this. And speaking of domestic politics a little bit, there was a major story this week, major news this week. Also, Seoul High Court suspending the retrial of the election law violation, and also a trial, another case, the urban development. That was also delayed, right?
They were all delayed indefinitely, and this was really expected. He's the president, and so now they're having a very literal interpretation of Article 84 of the Constitution, which says that a president can only be prosecuted when it comes to insurrection and treason and for nothing else. Even if the trials were something that had happened before he became president, they are all put on hold. So at least for the next 5 years, Lee Jae-myung, unless he decides to, declare martial law unjustly, he's fine.
And imagine what the Supreme Court justices might be thinking, like looking at that breaking news from the Seoul High Court. What would have they thought?
Well, they might be kicking themselves in behind right now. So, yeah, good call.
And lastly, there were a lot of focus in the past week about economy, finance, fiscal decisions that will be made going forward. And just to name one of them, he pledged a crackdown on stock abuses.
Yeah. Now, as soon as I saw that, the first thing that I thought was, okay, so this is part of his revenge spree. As anyone who's paid attention to South Korean news will know, when it comes to stock manipulation, and if we're going to talk about Lee Jae-myung or the government, we cannot not mention the former First Lady. The former First Lady, Kim Gun-hee, has long been accused of having manipulated Deutsche Motor stocks, and there were a lot of attempts to investigate her and her alleged role.
Oh, and the special investigations passed, including the one for her, which is the longest.
Exactly. And so when Lee Jae-myung said that stock manipulation is something that we'll have to really clamp down on, and it will lead to what he said was quote-unquote legal and financial ruin, if that is something that you participate in. So immediately that sent a political shot across the bow that he's going to really hammer home the fact that this has to investigate the First Lady, the former First Lady. But also at the same time, sure, even if this had a political motivation, it's also going to have a lot of great benefits if it is actually pursued consistently. Because one thing that we have to keep in mind is that stock manipulation is one of the tactics that have been used for a long time by corporate elites to ensure that they retain control of their own companies. Lee Jae-myung, the Samsung chairman, was just found not guilty of that sort of practice, But it's not just Lee Jae-myung, it's every single scion or every single major figure in South Korea's corporate sector where they've tried to merge one of their subsidiaries with another to retain their family's control of their companies. And so if this is the sort of thing where they can also say it's not just about the former first lady, it's also about fairness in the stock markets,
Which she pledged for initially.
which she also pledged, then now this is the very big if it is pursued consistently, then this could really go a long way in resolving the Korea discounts, which refers to the perpetual and perennial undervaluation of South Korean stocks.
Right. And in order for this issue to not become like overly politicized and at the end sort of gets counterproductive, he will have to watch his language when he's talking about this, not to imply too much about the former first lady, right?
Yeah, the whole financial and legal ruin was a bit of a strong language.
It was a bit far, but if you look at the Kospi galleries online, like the online communities, or stock market online communities, or currency rate issues, like they are all stabilizing right now. They are kind of revering Lee right now.
Well, social media does tend to love extreme language.
Yeah.
Let's not put too much stock into that. Pun definitely intended.
Looking to stay informed about South Korea's fast-evolving political, business and cultural landscape? Join us on Korea Pro, the go-to resource for in-depth analysis expertly curated by top-tier professionals. And now you can pick the membership level that best suits your needs, thanks to our new subscription packages. Starting at just $199 annually, you can access daily analysis and our weekly podcast. Or try our premium membership package, which offers additional perks such as executive briefings, monthly reports and forecasts, networking receptions and event opportunities, as well as much, much more. To find the best fit for you, just head to signup.koreapro.org and become a member today.
Week ahead, G7. It's from Sunday to Tuesday. The South Korean media is mostly focusing on whether or not Lee will be able to meet Trump on the sidelines, but it seems like it's not decided yet.
Regardless of when Lee Jae-myung meets Trump, that's going to happen sooner or later. But what I'm really thinking of, especially because of the location where this G7 meeting is taking place, it's taking place in Canada. And we've all seen Ottawa-Washington relations just deteriorate since January.
And Canada actually fired back pretty strongly, right?
Yes, and Canada, because of the tariffs that they face from the U.S. and because of all these random remarks about becoming the next U.S. state, Canada right now is trying to diversify trade. And one of Canada's biggest exports is energy. One of South Korea's biggest imports is energy. And so hopefully this is something that South Korea and Canada can actually talk about while they're meeting.
Yeah. And also, like, they could share a couple of notes probably to Seoul about how they actually handled the initial tariff breakdown with Trump at the time.
That would be fun.
And secondly, there are some media reports about Trump administration reviewing the summer impact under AUKUS. And South Korea currently, it's still trying to get into Pillar 2, right?
Pillar 2 AUKUS, but yes, that's not the military side of it. That's the logistical side of it. But because of
technology and other issues.
Technology sharing. And that's the sort of thing that Yoon was really pushing for. But we're not quite sure if that's going to be a priority under the Lee Jae-myung administration.
Right. The Pillar 2 was actually in the People Power Party candidate Kim Moon-soo's policy direction, it seems, but it's unclear with the Lee administration. And we will probably see more cabinet minister rumors or nominations in coming weeks.
And all of this information will be sent to your email inboxes by 2 p.m. on Monday. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe. Have a good weekend, everyone.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We'll brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why it matters, delivered to your inbox every morning.
If you want to stay ahead of the curve, sign up for Korea Pro to get a full package of insights, from daily expert analysis to profiles, month in review, week ahead.